We had some great speakers telling us about organizing in Maine, and now we'll hear from Kate Travis from the Maine Democratic Party. Let's send her in. Kate is actually involved in charge of getting out-of-state folks to volunteer, so a perfect segue. Welcome, Kate. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
A first question, you're our first Maine speaker. For anyone tuning in from Maine, what's going on in terms of voting protocols? What's the safest and most convenient way for folks to sign up to vote? And, what are some maybe key deadlines or things that people should be paying attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Portland Press Herald actually just reported that over 120,000 people have already requested their absentee ballots for this election, which is just a completely record-breaking number. So we want everyone to request their absentee ballots as soon as possible. You can request them now. There's a whole website. It's called voteinmaine.com. If you go to voteinmaine.com/ballot, you can request your absentee ballot there, but that will also have information about voting practices, about filling out your ballot, and about the key deadlines too.
That is awesome. Thank you. My understanding, so you work with the Maine Democratic Party, and your role is getting out-of-state folks engaged to volunteer. So can you tell us what you've got going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. This election is so close in so many places, including Maine. So it's really going to be one conversation at a time. I think a lot of folks really miss canvassing, but in order to be safe, we really want to keep people distant. And so the best way to talk to voters, to really have those conversations that will change minds and change the outcome of this election, is to make those calls. We have less than 9 weeks until election day right now. So if everyone signs up for 1-hour shifts twice a week, that is 18 hours for 6 years of having Sarah Gideon as your senator, for having a Democratic Senate, for having Joe Biden being able to make his policies without Mitch McConnell blocking them, which will save people not just for the next 4 years, but has far-reaching consequences that will affect my life, my children's lives, all of that, kind of what Lana was talking about earlier with this is a really consequential election, not just for this year, but the years going forward.
And I wanted to ask, a lot of times when people in blue states think about like, oh, I need to get involved in an out-of-state action, they might not think of Maine at the top of the list. Can you tell us a bit about the environment in Maine, the Maine races, and why it's actually important for people looking to dedicate their time to focus on Maine?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I chose Maine. I come from a blue state and I chose Maine. And that's because when Donald Trump got elected, everyone was so heartbroken and so scared. And we looked to senators like Senator Susan Collins to stand up to the people in power, to put country over party. And she's repeatedly proved that she will not do that. So that means that we have to vote her out of office. Maine has this incredible history of senators, especially Republican senators, standing up for their country and standing up in particular for Mainers. I also want to emphasize that Donald Trump won an electoral vote in Maine in 2016. And so we really want all 4 to go to Joe Biden. But most importantly, we want to elect people that will stand up to the people in power. And I think one of the nice things about working in Maine is that we don't just have someone to organize against, we have someone to organize for. Sarah Gideon is Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives. She proposed expanding access to life-saving medication for people overdosing from drugs. And when their Republican governor vetoed it, she brought together Republicans and Democrats to override the veto and make sure that people got access to the health care she needs. So I think she's shown that she's willing to stand up to those in power and put the people that she serves first.
Absolutely. And actually, this might be a good time, to share just some of the things that our Young Dems group thought was really awesome about Sarah Gideon. She's the Speaker of the Maine House of Representatives and started her career in public service as a local town council member. So we've just been doing all of our local endorsement process. It's really inspiring to kind of know that some of those people can end up being these big national figures that will make a difference for the whole country. And, she's worked to expand Medicaid to over 70,000 Mainers, passed a bill setting a goal of achieving 100% renewable energy in Maine by 2050. And she's a really strong reproductive rights champion, which is really important to a lot of us, expanding abortion access in Maine and working to restore Title X funding to Planned Parenthood in Congress. So that's some of the things that we were really stoked about her. And but we really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us, giving crucial information for how Maine voters can vote safely and effectively, and then why out-of-state folks should pay attention to Maine and join in a phone bank, a text bank. And
wait, can I ask
we've
one question on that, Karen, before we let her
absolutely.
go? And as someone that, is in California and these things, and I think one of the things I've always heard is people being a little bit worried to and dip into somebody else's election like this. And so for those that maybe are a little bit concerned that they don't have that voice in another state, what would you say to them?
I would say that Senate is a federally elected office, that what happens in Maine affects those of us in Massachusetts, those of us in California. I mean, putting Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court will affect the entire country for decades. And so I think it's important to care about what happens in other places, not just because it'll impact you, but because it'll impact other people. And because if we're going to live in a great country, we need to be in a place where we care about each other and where we care about the outcomes of what happens in places other than we live. So I would say, you can sign up to make calls to Maine from anywhere from your home. I make calls from my bed sometimes at my.maindems.org. And if you're in Maine and you need to request an absentee ballot, voteinmaine.com/ballot.
Thank you so much. We'll definitely get those links in the chat. Really appreciate you having you on, Kate. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you again for having me.